And today on Relationships and Astrology, we have a special interview with Alex Trenoweth, who is an astrologer who has done quite a bit of research on astrology and parenting relationships. Her book, Growing Pains, is a big favorite of mine. I consider it to be, well, the model of what an astrology book could be, because it's a great book full of excellent astrological information that anybody could read. And you don't need to know you don't need to know your sun sign in order to read the book. And it will help parents and educators. So very, very pleased to have Alex with us today. My colleague Margaret Gray and I are going to ask some questions, and Alex will answer them.
Thank you very much, Armin. Thanks, Margaret.
Hi, Alex. It's so lovely to see you. And, Alex, we've been thinking and talking, of course, and we've talked before when we've met at conferences and so on about, what happens in a classroom and what are the important features and how can astrology help. And one of the things that I think isn't often addressed is the actual relationship between the teachers and the students and the pupils. How do you think astrology might help this relationship? Because it's really such an important one, but somehow, so much focus goes on the academic work that I think that gets kind of put to the side.
Well, the relationship between a teacher and a pupil is of the utmost importance. And the odds are stacked against that relationship because there are 30 students in a class and one single teacher. And the student in a secondary school or a high school will move around classes 5 or 6 times a day. So they're going to meet, 5 or 6 different teachers. And every time the classes change, of course, the teacher has to get used to a new set of 30 pupils. And now, unlike primary school, where the teacher is just going to be teaching one group of students all day, the secondary school teacher is going to have, up to 14 sets of students over a 2-week rolling rota. So they could teach up to 500 students and maybe even more with, after school work and things like that. So, like I say, the odds are very much stacked against, having a healthy relationship because the teacher's under so much stress, because the students are under so much pressure to do well in their exams. But what I tell teachers, the first and foremost and most important thing to do is to focus on your own Saturn, right? That has to be the most important thing, because as an authority figure, Saturn becomes our guiding light. And Saturn takes it doesn't have the greatest reputation in astrology, but that is the anchor for any person in a position of authority. Because if your students, if you don't understand your own Saturn sign, your students will, and they'll press your buttons and they'll drive you crazy. So you need to be that anchor. You need to be that calm, still voice. And you need to recognize that when a student asks a question or they say something that, did you mean to say it in the way that's going to hurt my feelings? You need to rise above it all and be that responsible adult and look at it beyond that little simple statement and look beyond what the student's needs are. I have a way of working as a teacher in that I understand all my year groups. So if I teach year 7, I know where their Jupiter and their Saturn signs are. That is just something that's always running through my head. So if I teach the next class that's year 11, I understand their Jupiter and Saturn. So it kind of works as a pair. So, and of course, their Saturn and their Jupiter works against my Saturn and Jupiter or with my Saturn and Jupiter. So if I understand this, I already have a really good understanding of their own cycles of development.
What a difference that makes, Alex, really for you as a teacher to know something about the astrology of children, and how amazing it would be if, all teachers had even just the basics of astrology to understand those things. I mean, what a difference it would make for the children and for the teachers, that it would make life much easier. Do you foresee a time when that might become more possible in schools? I mean, I know you're teaching in the UK and I'm based in Ireland. Our system is fairly similar. Do you think that's something that schools might be open to a little bit more at some point?
Sadly, no.
Okay.
Okay. I was effectively barred from even, for parents. If I was threatened with dismissal if a parent complained about my astrology practice. So I had to even use a different name in teaching, so that the connection wouldn't be made between Alex Trenoweth, the teacher, and my teaching name. And I guess it was because of the threat of I might make a prediction. But this is the most ironic thing ever, because as a teacher, I make predictions all the time. And my predictions as a teacher, are going to have a bigger effect on my future, the future of my students, than anything I could say as an astrologer. My predictions as a teacher could determine what stream or what set a child gets into, and which is going to have a knock-on effect on the exams that they're going to take. It's just going to have a knock-on effect on the sixth form they're going to get into, and ultimately the university, or whether or not they even get into university. So it's completely ironic that, what they were so afraid of was me making predictions.
It's interesting, too, because the dynamics that you're describing are really for an entire year, because the little sub-generation, Saturn changes sign every 2.5 years, Jupiter changes sign every year. And I think all teachers know, or, you'll often hear this sort of, oh, this year's crop is such and such, and, last year's group was so everybody kind of knows that there are these waves, and to have like a way of understanding it, it's very far from any sort of prediction. It's really just a method of understanding.
Yes, and the changes, okay, so we got the first Jupiter return at roughly around 11, 12 years old. Any teacher will tell you there's a world of difference between teaching year 7s to teaching year 11. There's a huge amount of development that goes on. Year 9, I can tell you, just from qualitative analysis of teacher surveys that I've done, year 9 is the teacher's least favorite class to teach. Those are 13 and 14-year-olds. Now, what happens at that stage is after the Jupiter return at 12, they have the Jupiter sextile to its natal position, as well as the first Ptolemaic aspect from an outer planet, Uranus, at the same time. Uranus rules rebellion, it rules the gang-like behavior, and I also think it kind of rules the social norms that are developing. When children are starting to move away from seeing parents and teachers as being authority figures and shifting it towards their own peers as being the points of information that they want to have.
That's so interesting, Alex, and it brings me also to another question where I was thinking, the importance of relationships between children, how these relationships are affected by being in the same generation, particularly with their transpersonal planets. What are your thoughts about that?
I get very frustrated because at the age of 15 is when a child, we had the Saturn opposition. So between the Jupiter return and the Saturn opposition is when all the brain development is happening. This is not an astrological thing. This is a neurological thing. But because of all the exams that are being taken, it's the funding goes to the older children to help them pass exams. They're missing out, the educators are missing out on this great opportunity to help children overcome any past difficulties, because what we know about the brain development too is that a window of opportunity happens between the first Jupiter return and the first Saturn opposition, where any child that's fallen behind in development for past trauma, abusive behaviors, stuff like that, they can actually be kind of retrained or reintegrated into what is seen as normal. But that lack of understanding isn't happening because the funding goes to the older children.
That's such a shame. I mean, it really sounds like there could be just some tweaking that could be done, or a greater understanding that really would make quite a difference in it. And also, the other thing we were thinking about is the parent-teacher relationship, but it sounds like that's even more challenging because with so many teachers, particularly at an older age, then I imagine that it might be difficult for the parents to actually even get to connect with all the teachers in their child's school.
You raise a really important point too. The majority of teachers are young female teachers. They're not older. I am an older teacher because I understand my Saturn and because I was able to work with it. Most teachers drop out of the profession within the first 5 years.
Wow.
So you're getting inexperienced teachers who can't last. And, it's a shame. And, it comes down again to funding. An older teacher doesn't want to stay in the profession because they don't get the pay rises. They don't, have the support that they really should have. They're not valued as much as I'm really sorry to say this, and the young teachers, the young, cheaper teachers that come in straight from university.
That's such a shame.
Do you think that the age at which teachers come in from university, if I use U.S. standards, it would be right around the time of the Uranus square and the Saturn three-quarter square, right around the
21,
22 age. I don't know if it would be the same thing in the UK, but that's very much a time of self-assertion and testing for oneself. It seems like it would be a pretty tricky time to get established.
Yeah. And I see young teachers coming into the profession, and, doing your teacher's training is the most difficult thing ever, because you don't, it's not teaching isn't a natural thing. First of all, you're teaching in a very unnatural environment, and you're trying to dance to Ofsted's tune, which is always changing, because this is the frustration of the, not understanding astrology, because you have your first year teaching Jupiter and Libra students, and you think, wow, okay, I really understand Jupiter and Libra students, by the end of the year. And then you get a new fresh influx of Jupiter in Scorpio students, or Jupiter in Virgo students, or whatever it is. And you're suddenly having to start back to square one. So, understanding how Jupiter and Saturn move is really going to help you prepare for your lessons. I always found I was, a step ahead. If I understand my Jupiter and Libra students, it doesn't take me long to get them interested in what they have to do from the very start. It doesn't mean they get their way all the time. It means that if I have to present something that I don't think they're going to like, I can put the support mechanisms in place that are going to help them. I can give them more time. I can give them more group work. I can do whatever is needed to get the point across.
One sort of final question that I have, and I think that this is a sticky one, but in addition to using this for teachers, this is something, the Jupiter Saturn information is something that parents can use with their children. And do you think, though, that with all the other things that go on in the parent-child dynamic, that taking a look at Jupiter and Saturn is really going to be helpful for them, or is it in a very contained way?
In fact, I'm writing a paper on, how really the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Moon, and to a certain extent Mars, they're not really all that helpful, because if say I'm teaching a child and they have Mercury and Leo, and if I meet the parent at the school gate and whisper in the ear, "Hey, your kid's going to make a great actor or actress," is that really helpful? Right? Whereas if I look at their Jupiter and I say, "Hey, your child has, Jupiter and Leo," maybe what they really need is to have a chance to develop themselves, as somebody who likes to be on the center stage, or needs to learn how to share that stage. And, when I do family work, I'm looking at the whole family dynamic, because most astrologers don't work with children at all because they're under 18. I do, but I have a particular way of working, and that is I don't look at the personal planets at all, and I'm not making predictions. I'm helping the parent work with that Jupiter and Saturn alongside their own Jupiter and Saturn, because the parent also has that Saturn dialogue running through their heads too, the things that make them insecure as authority figures. And it's going to help them enormously if they're aware of that background voice, so that they can help their child develop their own sense of independence. Because think of what parents say to children. "No, you can't do that. It's not safe." Right? Parents and teachers as well, but parents in particular spend a lot of time protecting their children. And we also have this in a wider global sense with politics as well. When our politicians say, "No, you can't do this," or "You must have a sugar tax because you can't manage it on their own," they're also responding to their own Saturn.
Alex, it's been such a delight to have you with us. Thank you so much. And just finally, I believe you're working on another book. Is that right?
Yes, I've been working on this book for a while. I've been so busy with other things, but I'm actually working on many books, but The Wolfie Feed is the book on Saturn cycles, but I'm also doing something on Jupiter cycles called Zeus on the Loose.
Fantastic. That's wonderful.
And also a book on synastry called Mirror Mirror, which is looking at the charts of actors and actresses with the biographical character that they play. So
that's wonderful. So a lot more. So next time we talk to you, there'll be a lot more books out there. Alex, it's so lovely to talk to you, and we'll see you at UX soon.
Okay. Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Bye.